Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today it's all about seeing if there's a pen that can really write on wet paint. Now, I was given this Sharpie pen recently by a friend, thank you, Kathy, and this claims on here it says marks on wet and oily surfaces. Now, I don't think they really mean paint with that. This is more of a contractor kind of supply, but I'm thinking it's time to test this out and see if it can handle some wet paint. And also too, in the video, you're going to see me use this pen, a fountain pen, and there's going to be a little bit of a mishap with that. But as always, those mishaps are just an oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. The play began on this wood panel. Now the paint that's on here already, that blue paint, it is completely dry because it was done months and months or eons ago when I was just playing around with my alternating diamond stencil that I created for StencilGirl. So if I want to test that pen out on wet paint, I'm going to need to add some more color here. So twist my arm to cover up that white space with all sorts of color. Now here's the thing, as I'm filling this in, you need to be aware that this is actually a time of great concentration for me. Not the trying to color within the lines, because actually clearly I'm not coloring within the lines, but it's actually getting the order of the colors correct so that I have this continuous repeating pattern of these colors throughout this whole piece. I was actually kind of fixated on having that repeating pattern, and I have no idea why. And it is mildly embarrassing how much thought it actually took to make this happen. Does that ever happen to you when you're playing where there's something that you just really focus and fixate on and you have no idea why, but you just know you better do it that way? I've just about got all the white space filled in here with paint, and that means it's just about time to test out this pen that made this very outrageous claim that it will mark on wet and oily things. And this is definitely going to be wet. In fact, this is going to be wet enough that I know that any pen that I have would be ruined if I do this. I can guarantee it 100% it's going to be ruined. But this Sharpie Pro pen supposedly can handle this. So let's give it a test here. I'm going to start outlining the shapes that are on here using this, and so far it's holding up pretty well. But there are some big areas of very wet paint on here. So what's going to happen to the tip of this pen when it gets covered up in wet paint? Any other felt tip type pen that I have would be trashed by this point. And I had a glob of paint on there. And I actually just wiped it off with a paper towel, and now I'm back to getting more on here. But to start out strong is one thing, but to keep going, that's another. And the pen is getting a little bit softer here, and that's telling me that the tip is getting clogged up by paint. So not only am I wiping it off with a towel, I'm also scribbling with it over on some paper just to get off every bit of residue that I can from the tip. Now I figure we're at death's door here for this pen, that it's not going to survive this because look how little of this I've already done, and I'm going to do this to the whole thing. How on earth is this pen going to survive all of this? Well, I'll give you a little spoiler alert here. It does survive. I do have to go through and wipe off the globs of wet paint on it from time to time and clean it off on some paper, but it just keeps on going. I'm just going to keep repeating this process over and over again. As long as I'm getting a nice, dark, bright line here, bright line? Well, you know what I mean, a bold line. That was the better B word that I wanted, a bold line. Then I know the pen tip is doing just fine. But when it gets to the point where it gets a little more faded for me, I'm not getting as bold of a line, that tells me I need to clean off the tip. Another clue to clean off the tip is when there's a big glob of wet paint on it. That clue I took too. Sometimes I'll just wipe it off on the paper towel. Sometimes it's wipe it off and scribble. And every time this thing came back. I've never had a pen live this long through this much wet paint before. This pen wasn't actually designed for artists. This was designed for contractors working on job sites that need to write on things. So when they say that it marks on wet and oily surfaces, I really doubt that they meant it would go for paint, but by golly, this thing has held up incredibly well. Well, now that I've got all sorts of color going on there, it's time to put a few words on it. And to do that, I'm going to reach into a book called The Art of Play Production. I'm going to randomly choose a page here, and I'm going to use the words from that page. Now, the whole reason I got my hands on this book was simply for the title. How could I not go for a book that had a title like that? I'm going to look through this page for words that are of interest to me, and I want to get a little color on them before I cut them out. So I'm just going to take some of that paint and put a small amount of it over the words that I want, and then I'm going to cut the words out one by one. And then I'm simply going to rinse and repeat. Do this over and over again until I've got all the words that I want to put on here. Then it's time to bring out the glue stick and get them stuck on there. So what deep and thoughtful and insightful words did I find in this random page for a book? Yeah, not really many. So what I did find though was the phrase insist on pantomime. And I decided that's the one I'm really going to go with here. Sure, I've got other words on here like imagined and being and essential magic, but the ones that have the most meaning for me are insist on pantomime. And that's what I'm going to do. Next time my family asks me a question that's, well, one they've asked me over and over again, I'm going to answer that in pantomime. The last thing that I want to put on here is a little bit of scribbled journaling. The paint is dry now, and so I can take something like a fountain pen very safely on top of it. Or at least I think I can, but this fountain pen just isn't really working. Even though I know the paint's dry, I can't figure out why it just won't do its job. It almost always works for me. I never have this problem. Well, guess what it turns out to be? It's running out of ink. If you run out of ink, pens really don't work well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the cartridge in it. I've gotten rid of the old used up cartridge, and now I'm going to get a fresh one. First thing I have to figure out is which end do I put on the pen? And it's the end that has the little roller ball on it that you push in there, and you do need to push it in until it snaps in place. Then you simply screw on the top and get the ink flowing again. This is a big do as I say, not as I do moment, because when you go and put that cartridge on and you snap it in, you may not want to be right there next to what you're working on, because what you may not have caught on camera is a little bit of the ink went splat and splurt and flying. And not a ton of it, but just a little bit. And that's going to create a problem here in just a moment. As I finish up this bit of scribbled journaling, I notice a little bit of it on one of the pink diamonds. And so I thought, oh, I'll just use my finger and clean it off. Yeah, that's another oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. Because I can't cover that up. I can't make it go away. So I decided, let's just do it a whole bunch more. So taking that fountain pen that has that fresh cartridge in it that's nice and juicy, I am just splattering more of that black ink all over the place. Of course, this is creating a little bit of a challenge for me because there's more journaling that I want to add to this, more scribbling on here, more thoughts to put into this. But I've got these wonderful black ink splots that are very, very wet. So that means I need to get some journaling on here without getting my hand on this. And I'm going to take this challenge because there's got to be a way to do it and not smear all those wonderful black spots. So I'm going to hold my hand up nice and high, and then I'm going to start doing my journaling. Now you might be thinking, Carolyn, it's logical if you just step away for a few minutes and let everything dry, then come back and do the journaling, and you don't have to worry about anything smearing. And I agree that that is very logical, very rational, and a very reasonable point of view. But that's the thing about play. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It can be whatever it is you want it to be. And today I'm feeling impatient, so I am not going to be reasonable and rational about this. I'm just going to raise that hand up and do my scribbled journaling all around those wet spots. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned a few things along the way. If you have had fun, then give this video a thumbs up. I'd so appreciate it. And if you'd like to see more of what I'm making and creating, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I have a new video out. And of course, if you want more fun, you want more play, you can find it all over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com. Thanks for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.